Thursday, March 14th, 2024. Oak 47. Provincial Prison of Riverside, Module C, Wing 3. Carlos Mendoza, a maintenance officer with 17 years inside these walls and a worn badge clipped to his belt, pulls open the metal service door that separates the administrative corridor from the main cell block. The hinges emit their familiar groan, a sound he knows by heart. But this morning, the echo travels differently through the concrete hallway. What nobody in central control, in the courthouse offices, or in the director's suite knew at that moment was that within 93 minutes, every routine they had built over decades would collapse into a single imperative: absolute stillness. You believe a prison inspection is about clipboards and checklists. You imagine bureaucrats walking sterile corridors, nodding at paperwork, and leaving before lunch. That myth dies the moment you understand what 6 hours of complete operational freeze actually means. The average provincial facility processes 423 individual movements per day. Cell openings, meal distributions, medical appointments, workshop rotations, family visits, legal consultations, recreational yard time, and the constant ballet of security personnel changing posts every 4 hours. An inspection day reduces that number to zero. Not metaphorically zero, literally zero. For 6 uninterrupted hours, 1,283 human beings, along with the 174 staff members supervising them, exist in a state of suspended animation. A veteran custody officer with 22 years of service once told an internal review board, "It's not that time stops. Time becomes visible. You can see it pressing against every locked door." The architecture reveals its true nature when nothing moves. Riverside Provincial holds 1,283 inmates across 4 modules. Each module subdivided into 4 wings. Each wing containing 72 cells arranged in 3 tiers, connected by steel staircases. The facility was designed for 960 occupants. That 33% overcapacity translates into bunks welded to walls that were never meant to bear them, into doubled occupancy in cells measuring 7.2 meters square, into a recreational yard of 4,100 square meters that must rotate 12 separate groups throughout a normal day, because 1,200 bodies cannot safely coexist in that space simultaneously. But on inspection day, the yard stands empty. The steel tables bolted into the concrete, the basketball hoops with their chain-link nets, the perimeter of yellow paint marking the 30-meter boundary beyond which no inmate may approach the outer fence. All of it waits under the March sun with the patience of a held breath. The protocol exists for a reason that most people never consider. Federal regulations mandate unannounced comprehensive facility audits twice per calendar year, and those audits cannot occur while normal operations create variables. You cannot accurately count commissary inventory while inmates are purchasing items. You cannot verify cell compliance while occupants are present to alter evidence. You cannot assess structural integrity while foot traffic obscures floor damage or loose railings. The inspection team, typically composed of 11 specialists covering security infrastructure, medical compliance, food services, sanitation standards, educational programs, and structural engineering, requires unobstructed access to every cubic meter of the institution. That access becomes possible only when the entire organism goes dormant. An internal operations manual, declassified in 2019 after a Freedom of Information request, states with bureaucratic precision, "Total operational suspension ensures auditor safety, preserves evidence integrity, and minimizes litigation exposure resulting from inspection-related incidents." Translation: if an inmate moves during inspection and something goes wrong, the lawsuits multiply. Or 7.15. Extraordinary count. Every facility conducts formal inmate counts at least 4 times daily. 6 hour, 12 hour, 17 hour, and midnight. But inspection morning adds a 5th. The count officer for Wing 3, a woman named Patricia Reeves, who has performed this ritual 2,847 times over her 7 years of service, walks the catwalk with her handheld counter clicking softly. Each cell door has a small window of reinforced glass measuring 15 centimeters by 40 centimeters. Through each window, she verifies presence. 2 bodies, both breathing, both accounted for. The process takes 18 minutes for 72 cells. In a normal count, if she finishes, she radios the number to control and moves to her next assignment. On inspection day, she finishes and then stands at the end of the catwalk waiting, because there are no next assignments. The facility has entered what staff privately call the freeze. Behind those cell doors, routines die. Normally, 0645 triggers the first unlock sequence. Cells open in groups of 12, staggered across 45 minutes to prevent corridor congestion. Inmates proceed to the dining hall in Module A, a space measuring 32 meters by 18 meters, filled with 48 rectangular steel tables, each seating 8, where they collect breakfast trays through a serving window. The kitchen, staffed by 14 inmates working under supervision of 3 civilian food service employees, begins preparing that breakfast at 0430. 1,627 eggs, 94 liters of oatmeal, 732 slices of toast, and 112 liters of coffee for the first morning shift alone. On inspection day, breakfast happens inside the cells. Trays slide through the door slots one by one, a process that consumes 97 additional minutes and requires reheating food twice to maintain minimum temperature standards. An internal cost analysis from 2023 calculated that a single inspection day adds $4,112 in operational expenses, primarily from wasted labor hours and food temperature failures requiring disposal. The myth says prisoners hate inspection days. The reality is more complex. For some, the frozen hours offer relief. The recreational yard operates on a rotation system that allots each wing exactly 90 minutes of outdoor time per day. In summer, that means 90 minutes under sun that turns the concrete into a radiant oven. In winter, it means 90 minutes of cold that seeps through the standard issue canvas jackets. But it also means 90 minutes of exposure, of navigating social hierarchies, of avoiding conflicts or settling them, of performing the constant calculus of prison survival. An inspection day eliminates that calculation. The cell becomes a shelter rather than a cage. A man who served 6 years in Riverside before his release in 2022 told a re-entry program coordinator, "Inspection days were the only days I slept past 7 in the morning. The only days nobody needed anything from you." For others, particularly those in administrative segregation units where isolation is already the norm, inspection day simply deepens the silence. 0833. The inspection team arrives through the staff entrance, bypassing the main gatehouse where family members and attorneys normally queue for security screening. 11 people carrying tablets, measuring lasers, moisture meters, and digital cameras. They fan out according to pre-assigned zones. 2 head immediately to the medical unit, a 16-bed infirmary located in Module B that serves the entire facility. Medical maintains its own strict protocols. Medication carts locked and inventoried daily, sharps containers sealed and weighed monthly, examination rooms sanitized after each use. But inspection demands deeper verification. They will count every pill in every bottle, compare physical inventory to digital records, check expiration dates on supplies stored in cabinets that may not have been fully emptied in months. The head nurse, A man named Thomas Elgin, who has worked corrections healthcare for 14 years, once explained to a medical journal interviewer, "We operate a pharmacy, an emergency room, a mental health clinic, and a chronic disease management center with a fraction of the resources a community clinic would consider adequate. And we do it behind walls where every syringe, every scalpel, every tongue depressor is a potential weapon." The numbers tell a story that visitors rarely grasp. Riverside employs 174 full-time staff, but they never appear simultaneously. A typical day shift runs 06 Grevage to 14 and includes 43 custody officers, 6 medical personnel, 4 kitchen staff, 2 maintenance workers, 1 unit manager, and 3 administrative employees, for a total of 59 people actively present. That produces a ratio of 1 staff member for every 22 inmates. Evening shift, running 14 scouts to 22 unités, drops to 41 total staff, a ratio of 1 to 31. Night shift, 22 scouts to 06 rouse, operates with a skeleton crew of 27, a ratio of 1 to 47. Those ratios govern everything from response times to emergency protocols to the simple question of how quickly a medical crisis can be addressed. During normal operations, control room monitors display feeds from 96 cameras positioned throughout the facility. 24 in common areas, 48 covering corridors and stairwells, 16 focused on entry and exit points, and 8 rotating across the perimeter. 3 officers watch those feeds continuously, scanning for anomalies. On inspection day, the cameras still record, but the watchers focus less on inmate movement, because there isn't any, and more on tracking the inspection team's progress through the facility. 13:02. An unusual silence settles over the dining hall. Normally, lunch service begins at 11:30 and generates a sustained din. 400 voices echoing off concrete walls, trays clattering against steel tables, chairs scraping tile floors. Today, the hall sits empty. Food service has shifted entirely to cell delivery, and the kitchen staff, with no serving line to manage, has time to notice things they typically overlook. The walk-in freezer door, which usually cycles open and closed 80 times per shift, remains closed except for the initial meal preparation pull. The industrial dishwashers, which normally run continuously from 11:45 to 13:15, sit idle. One of the kitchen supervisors, a civilian employee named Margaret Torres, uses the unscheduled downtime to check the temperature logs for the cold storage units. She discovers that freezer unit 2 has been running 0.7 degrees above regulation for the past 11 days. Not enough to spoil food immediately, but enough to accelerate freezer burn and reduce the effective shelf life of protein stores. It's a small problem, the kind that only becomes visible when routine noise stops masking the signal. She files a maintenance request. The repair will cost $830. The food waste prevented over the next 6 months will save approximately $4,000. The inspection team reaches Module C at 13:34. This is where structural engineering takes priority. The building is 42 years old, constructed in an era when corrections architecture favored poured concrete and minimal fenestration. Each cell block is essentially a reinforced concrete tube divided by internal steel frameworks. Over 4 decades, those frameworks settle, shift, and stress. Hairline cracks appear in load-bearing walls. Bolt holes elongate under repetitive strain. Welds develop microscopic failures that propagate over years. The engineers carry devices that measure concrete compression strength, detect rebar corrosion beneath the surface, and map vibration patterns that might indicate structural fatigue. They spend 47 minutes examining a section of catwalk on Tier 2, where custody officers have reported a slight bounce underfoot. The measurements reveal deflection within acceptable parameters, but barely. The catwalk is rated for a live load of 90 pounds per square foot. Adequate for routine foot traffic. Inadequate if 15 people congregated there simultaneously, which happens more often than designers anticipated. The engineer's notation reads, "Monitor quarterly. Consider reinforcement within 18 months." That notation will trigger a budget allocation process that takes 11 months, followed by construction bidding that takes 4 more, followed by work performed during another inspection day in the future when, once again, everything stops. 21.3. Alarm Level 2 in Wing C. Not an emergency, but an anomaly requiring immediate response. Level 2 means a sensor has triggered, in this case, a motion detector in a storage area that should have registered 0 activity all day. 4 custody officers converge on the location within 90 seconds, a response time mandated by policy for Level 2 alerts. They find nothing. No intruder, no disturbance, no obvious cause. The inspection team is nowhere near that section. Later analysis will reveal that a cardboard box on a high shelf, weakened by months of humidity, finally collapsed, and the falling weight tripped the sensor. But for 3 minutes, the freeze is tested. Officers unlock a checkpoint door, move through restricted corridors, verify the all clear, and return to their posts. The inspection continues uninterrupted, but the incident reminds everyone that 6 hours of stillness doesn't mean 6 hours of safety. A correctional lieutenant with 18 years of experience once told a training seminar, "The worst thing that can happen in a prison is when nothing is happening, because nothing is when nobody's paying attention." The invisible machinery behind the lockdown operates on contracts most people never consider. Riverside's food service is managed by a private vendor operating on a 3-year, $7.2 million contract that works out to approximately $15.38 per the inmate per day. That figure covers breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the minimum caloric and nutritional requirements mandated by federal standards. 2,400 calories, 65 grams of protein, and specified minimums for vitamins and minerals. The contract includes provisions for religious dietary accommodations, medical diets for diabetic and cardiac inmates, and emergency rations in case supply chains fail. The vendor employs 11 full-time staff and supervises the 14 inmate workers who do the actual cooking, serving, and cleaning. Those inmate workers earn between 35 cents and $1.20 per hour, deposited into commissary accounts that they can use to purchase supplemental items. Instant coffee, packaged cookies, stamped envelopes, AA batteries, deodorant. The commissary operates on a weekly ordering system, with each inmate allotted a spending cap of $75 per week. The average inmate spends $32 weekly. Multiply that across 1,283 inmates, and the commissary generates over $2 million in annual transactions, most of it channeled through a single vendor that holds an exclusive contract. Medical services run on a similar model. The facility contracts with a healthcare corporation that employs the nurses, doctors, and mental health clinicians who staff the infirmary. The contract value, $3.9 million annually, covering routine care, emergency response, psychiatric evaluation, medication management, and chronic disease treatment. The corporation assigns 2 full-time physicians, 7 registered nurses, 3 mental health counselors, and a rotating roster of specialists who visit monthly to address issues like dental care, ophthalmology, and physical therapy. The average inmate interacts with medical services 6.4 times per year. Those interactions range from medication refills, 38% of the population takes at least 1 prescribed medication daily, to emergency interventions like the chest pain incident that occurred last November when a 54-year-old man collapsed during recreational yard time and received defibrillation within 6 minutes, saving his life. The defibrillator, a hospital-grade device costing $14,000, is checked monthly and recertified annually. It has been deployed 9 times in the past 4 years. Educational and vocational programs form another layer. Riverside offers JIT preparation classes, vocational certifications in welding and computer repair, and a re-entry readiness program designed to reduce recidivism. Participation is voluntary but incentivized. Inmates enrolled in programs earn priority consideration for reduced custody levels, early release recommendations, and preferred housing assignments. Currently, 307 inmates are enrolled in educational programs, and 112 are in vocational training. The programs operate on a combined budget of $890,000 annually, funded through a mix of state allocations and federal grants. Instructors include certified teachers employed by the Corrections Department and volunteers from local community colleges. A GED instructor who has taught at Riverside for 9 years told a documentary crew in 2021, "You get guys in their 40s who never finished 8th grade, and you watch them solve algebra problems they thought were impossible. That moment when they realize they're not stupid. They were just never taught. That's the moment that changes trajectories." The facility's annual operating budget totals $47.6 million, breaking down to approximately $102 per inmate per day. That figure includes salaries, healthcare, food, utilities, maintenance, security equipment, and administrative overhead. By comparison, the average daily cost to house an inmate in a maximum security facility runs $173, while minimum security camps average $68. Riverside, classified as medium security, falls in the middle, balancing higher custody requirements with lower infrastructure costs than maximum security prisons. The state allocates these funds through an annual appropriations process that pits corrections spending against education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Every dollar spent inside these walls is a dollar that could fund something outside them. That tension never resolves, only recalibrates. 1647. The inspection team has reached the final module. Module A houses the facility's Administrative Segregation Unit, commonly known as ADSEG, or the Hole. 24 cells reserved for inmates who pose disciplinary risks, require protective custody, or are awaiting internal investigation outcomes. These cells differ from general population housing. Solid steel doors instead of barred gates, no cellmate. 23 hours of isolation with 1 hour of solitary yard time in a concrete enclosure measuring 4 meters by 6 meters. The average stay in ADSEG is 37 days. Some inmates cycle through multiple times, others serve continuous months. The psychological impact is well documented in correctional research. Increased anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, and post-release adjustment difficulties. Yet the practice continues because the alternative, allowing violent or vulnerable inmates to mix with general population, creates different risks. A prison psychologist with 11 years of experience told a professional ethics conference, "We use isolation to protect people, and in doing so, we sometimes destroy them." The question isn't whether ADSEG is harmful. The question is whether the alternative is more harmful. The inspection team reviews ADSEG meticulously. They check that each cell has functioning ventilation, that light fixtures provide the mandated minimum illumination of 30-foot candles, that the sanitation systems work, that the food delivery slots seal properly. They review logs documenting every hour an inmate spends in isolation. because federal guidelines limit continuous ADSEG placement to specific durations before requiring re-evaluation. They interview the 3 inmates currently in cells, asking standardized questions about conditions, treatment, and access to grievance procedures. The inmates provide answers ranging from cooperative to hostile. But all 3 confirm they understand why they're in isolation and how they can work toward release back to general population. One man, serving day 82 of a 90-day placement for assault on another inmate, tells the interviewer, "I get 3 meals, a bed, and nobody trying to kill me. Some guys out there would trade places." The comment gets noted in the report without editorial comment. 1814. The inspection team convenes in the conference room adjacent to the warden's office. 11 people comparing notes, cross-referencing findings, identifying discrepancies that require follow-up. The facility director, a woman named Angela Hartman, who has run Riverside for 6 years, waits outside. She knows the preliminary results will arrive within the hour, and the final written report will come in 4 to 6 weeks. That report will rate the facility across 14 categories: security infrastructure, medical compliance, food services, sanitation, maintenance, educational programs, mental health services, grievance procedures, legal access, religious accommodation, physical plant integrity, fire safety, emergency preparedness, and administrative documentation. Each category receives a score from 1 to 5, with 3 representing minimum compliance, 4 representing good performance, and 5 representing exemplary. Scores below 3 trigger mandatory corrective action plans with deadlines and potential sanctions, including loss of accreditation, loss of funding, or in extreme cases, court-ordered receivership. Last inspection cycle, Riverside scored an overall 3.7. Hartman is aiming for 3.9 this time. The difference between 3.7 and 3.9 is approximately $47,000 in additional state funding, increased discretion in program implementation, and enhanced standing when competing for grant opportunities. The industry behind the medal operates on scales that dwarf individual facilities. Nationally, corrections is a $120 billion sector employing over 400,000 people. Private contractors provide food, healthcare, telecommunications, commissary services, transportation, construction, and even the uniform staff wear. The largest food service contractor operates in 2,600 facilities across 43 states. The dominant telecommunications provider connects inmates with family through phone calls, video visits, and email systems, charging rates that generated $1.4 billion in revenue last year. Commissary vendors stock 57,000 different products, ranging from instant soup to MP3 players. Construction firms specializing in correctional design maintain architectural standards refined over decades. Sight lines that eliminate blind spots, materials that resist weapon fabrication, acoustic treatments that prevent long-distance communication between cells. A corrections industry conference held annually in Las Vegas draws 11,000 attendees and showcases innovations like biometric identification systems, drone detection networks, and pharmaceutical protocols for managing mental illness in custody. Training programs for correctional staff have evolved substantially over the past 2 decades. New hires at Riverside complete a 6-week academy covering legal authority, use of force, crisis intervention, suicide prevention, emergency response, and interpersonal communication. They spend 80 hours in classroom instruction and 40 hours in scenario-based training where actors simulate inmates exhibiting various behaviors: compliance, resistance, mental health crisis, medical emergency, violence. Graduates receive certification from the State Corrections Board and begin work under probationary status for 1 year. during which they're paired with veteran officers who provide mentorship and evaluation. Annual recertification requires 40 hours of continuing education, covering updated policies, emerging security threats, and evolving case law. The investment in training reflects a recognition that correctional work is not just about enforcing rules, but managing a complex human ecosystem where mistakes cascade into crises. Re-entry programs focus on the 74% of inmates who will eventually release back to communities. Riverside operates a 90-day pre-release track that addresses housing, employment, benefits enrollment, family reunification, and substance abuse treatment. Participants meet with case managers twice weekly, attend workshops on job interviewing and financial literacy, and connect with community organizations that provide post-release support. The facility has partnerships with 11 local employers who hire former inmates into positions ranging from warehouse work to construction to food service. Data tracking these individuals over 3 years shows a recidivism rate of 41%, meaning 41% return to prison within 3 years. That compares favorably to the national average of 53%, but still means that 4 out of every 10 people who complete the program will fail. A re-entry coordinator who has worked the program for 7 years told a nonprofit evaluation team, "Success isn't a straight line. It's a guy who gets out, struggles for 6 months, almost relapses, calls us, gets connected to a sponsor, and then holds it together. That's what success looks like in this world." 19:51. The freeze begins to thaw. The inspection team has completed its walkthrough and is finalizing documentation. Control room receives authorization to resume modified operations. Dinner service, delayed by 2 hours, begins cell-by-cell delivery. Custody officers unlock checkpoint doors and resume patrol rotations. The recreational yard remains closed. Reopening outdoor space requires daylight and full staffing. But internal corridors gradually return to supervised activity. Inmates who have been locked in cells for 13 consecutive hours hear the familiar sounds returning. Footsteps on catwalks, radios crackling with position reports, the distant clang of metal on metal that signals institutional life resuming. The transition is gradual, controlled, deliberate. By 21, the facility will return to evening routine. By 22, night shift will take over, and the day's anomaly will fade into the rhythm of rotating watches. The preliminary report, delivered verbally to Director Hartman at 2038, identifies 3 areas requiring attention: the freezer temperature variance in the kitchen, the catwalk deflection in Module C Tier 2, and incomplete documentation of mental health follow-ups in ADSEG. All 3 are classified as minor deficiencies correctable within 90 days. No major violations, no safety hazards requiring immediate remediation, no recommendation for external oversight. The overall score will likely land between 3.8 and 4.0, pending final documentation review. Hartman allows herself a measured satisfaction. 6 hours of frozen operations have purchased another 6 months of institutional legitimacy. The external validation comes from accreditation bodies that audit facilities against national standards. The American Correctional Association maintains a voluntary accreditation program that 487 facilities nationwide have achieved. Accreditation requires compliance with 512 standards covering every operational aspect, from inmate orientation procedures to hazardous material storage. Facilities undergo initial assessment, address deficiencies, host a multi-day on-site audit, and then maintain compliance through triennial re-audits. Riverside earned accreditation in 2019 and successfully re-accredited in 2022. The distinction provides legal protection, enhances funding applications, and signals to external stakeholders, courts, oversight agencies, advocacy groups, that the facility meets professional benchmarks. A corrections consultant who assists facilities with accreditation told a professional journal, "Accreditation doesn't guarantee excellence. It guarantees accountability. It means someone is checking, someone is measuring, and someone will notice if you slip." Friday, March 15th, 2024, 06:47. Maintenance Officer Carlos Mendoza pulls open the metal service door, and the hinges groan their familiar greeting. The echo travels through the corridor exactly as it should, absorbed by the ambient noise of an institution in motion. Cells unlock in their staggered sequences. Inmates queue for breakfast. Custody officers rotate posts. The kitchen staff begins the 423 movements that define a normal day. Yesterday's stillness has evaporated, leaving only a written report that will circulate through bureaucratic channels, generate compliance memos, trigger budget requests, and eventually settle into a filing cabinet where it will remain until the next inspection day comes around again in 6 months, when once more everything will freeze. The lesson embedded in those 6 hours is simple and absolute. A prison is not a building. It is a system under constant tension between movement and control. Freeze the movement, and you expose the control mechanisms. Resume the movement, and you test whether those mechanisms hold. The dance never ends. The inspections simply make the choreography visible. A Security Operations Manual revised in 2023 states in its opening paragraph, "The appearance of routine is not routine. It is the result of continuous effort, vigilant observation, and immediate intervention when patterns deviate from expectations. Complacency is the precursor to failure. Awareness is the foundation of safety." Those words apply equally to the custody officer watching camera feeds at 03:00, the nurse inventorying medications at 14:00, the teacher grading GED practice tests at 19:00, and the inspector measuring concrete compression at 13:00. They all serve the same purpose: maintaining the boundary between chaos and order in a space where both coexist perpetually. A former warden, retired after 31 years in corrections, once told a group of newly appointed facility directors at a regional conference, "You will spend every day managing contradictions. You will rehabilitate people you also punish. You will isolate individuals you are also required to treat humanely. You will maintain security while promoting programs that require trust. If you try to resolve these contradictions, you will fail. Your job is to balance them, day after day, knowing the balance will never be perfect." That philosophy permeates Riverside Provincial, visible in the 6 hours when contradictions pause and systems reveal themselves in stillness. The data continues accumulating. 6.4 medical interactions per inmate annually, $32 of commissary spending weekly, 41% recidivism over 3 years. 1 staff member for every 22 inmates on day shift. These numbers are not abstractions. They represent decisions: whether to approve a medical request, whether to allow a commissary purchase, whether to invest in a re-entry program, whether to hire additional staff. Each decision ripples through the system, affecting outcomes measured in everything from inmate complaints filed to officer injury rates, to post-release employment figures. The inspection day captures a snapshot of those ripples frozen in time, a diagnostic image of institutional health. The recognition that corrections is not merely punishment, but management, has taken decades to penetrate public consciousness. Early American prisons operated on models of silence and isolation, believing that removing all stimulation would inspire moral reflection and spiritual redemption. That philosophy produced Pennsylvania's Eastern State Penitentiary, where inmates spent years in solitary cells without human contact, slowly disintegrating psychologically. Modern corrections has largely abandoned that extreme, replacing it with graduated custody levels, evidence-based programming, and re-entry preparation. But the fundamental challenge remains. How do you confine people safely while preparing them to live freely? The answer involves steel doors that lock with hydraulic certainty and GED classrooms where men solve algebra problems. It involves overcrowded cell blocks and vocational welding programs. It involves punishment and preparation existing simultaneously, neither canceling the other. The inspection protocol serves as a mechanism for external accountability in a system that operates largely hidden from public view. Most citizens never enter a prison. Most never interact with corrections professionals. Most form opinions based on media representations that range from documentary realism to sensationalized fiction. The inspection process, mundane and bureaucratic as it appears, forces facilities to meet minimum standards regardless of public attention. The inspector measuring concrete deflection on Tier 2 is performing an act of civic hygiene, ensuring that the infrastructure of punishment meets basic safety requirements. The nurse counting pills in the medical cabinet is verifying that healthcare standards apply even to people society has deemed unworthy of freedom. The engineer photographing hairline cracks in load-bearing walls is documenting that time and use degrade all structures, and maintenance cannot be deferred indefinitely. Thursday, March 14th, 2024, 6:47. A metal service door groans open. An officer steps through. 6 hours of stillness wait ahead, and when they pass, the institution will either be validated in its routines or required to change them. Either outcome serves the same end: accountability. The freeze is not about stopping operations. The freeze is about proving they can be stopped, measured, and restarted, that control is real, not illusory. Absolute stillness is the ultimate authority.